Hello, YouTube friends. It's me, Grandpa Humbke. How is everything going? Thank you so much for the love, interest, and comments. I hope you've liked my Balloon Ranch stories, and today I will finish with part 3. My last trip to the Balloon Ranch took place in 1985-86. when I was a witness in a court case between my partner, Larry, and a local bank. Larry had lent $10,000 to our management for operations in 1984, which had mysteriously disappeared from our bank account in October. We were not sure where the funds were, and Larry had filed a lawsuit against the bank for transferring the $10,000 without our permission. It appeared that our secretary, who had also been the previous secretary, had transferred the money from our account to the previous owner without our permission. The result was a court case in the small town of Monte Vista, Colorado, between Larry and the bank, in which I was to be Larry's main witness. I found myself in a car with Larry and his lawyer making the 4-hour trip from Denver to Monte Vista, during which the lawyer tried to prep me as to how I was to answer questions in court. I told him I could and would only answer questions according to what I believed to be the truth. The next morning, we entered an old stately courthouse, which to me had the smell of old polished wood and many previous cases in which solemn judgments were handed to both those prosecuting and those defending. I was already petrified and sat by myself in the front row, the only person in the courtroom besides the 2 lawyers, their clients, and court personnel. We all rose when the judge came out in a black robe, accompanied by a tall older man wearing a cowboy hat, who was the retired bank manager. They were chatting with each other and were obviously friends. At that point, I was scared that Larry would lose hope of winning the case, and even worse, we would be charged and held. During an intermission, I went out in the hall where Larry was. While we talked, a local sheriff walked up and handed Larry an envelope, which he allowed to fall to the floor. The sheriff immediately put his hand on his revolver and ordered Larry to pick up the envelope, which Larry immediately did. It turned out the sheriff was serving Larry with an unpaid bill of the Balloon Ranch. Let me tell you, I was plenty scared, as it felt we were back in the old Wild West, where justice was harsh and fierce. I spent the rest of my time in that courthouse sitting quietly in the front row by myself. The second day, after the lawyers had presented their closing cases, the judge asked why the Canadian in the front row was here. He said he was sure I would not come all the way from Canada to watch such a minor court case, and that he wanted me to be sworn in and that he would question me. No one objected, and I was too petrified to resist, so shaking both internally and externally, I took the witness stand. The judge was profoundly serious, specific, and direct with his questions. I felt as if I died and was receiving my final judgment from God himself. If I ever told the truth, I certainly did then. It turned out that I was the only one with the authority to spend or transfer the money, and that I was in Alamosa, another town, celebrating my middle daughter's, Nadine, birthday. The secretary had phoned the bank and had the money transferred without my permission or knowledge. I was absolutely dumbfounded when the judge turned to his friend, the retired bank manager, and said I was the only one telling the truth and that he should be ashamed of himself. He ordered the bank to pay the plaintiff, Larry, the $10,000 plus interest from the time it was removed from our account. It was a great lesson for me to never be afraid of telling the truth in a court of law. Since then, I've always had the greatest respect for judges and their ability to determine the truth. Justice was served. Looking back at the Balloon Ranch experience years later, I did suffer a large personal financial loss, but nothing as bad as what was happening back in Saskatchewan with the 3 hotels. While gone, interest rates on floating rate mortgages were rising while business was tanking. I managed to pay wages and employees' income tax deductions, but other bills had gone unpaid for too long. We should have sold the LaSalle Hotel for a profit after building up the business in the first 2 years. But instead, I overexpanded, business dropped drastically, and eventually I had to walk away from it all empty-handed, except for a big fat goose egg and debt. It was back to being a school principal to build up finances once again. 2 years later, while working for the federal government in Calgary, I was served by a firm of lawyers called Wolfgang. I thought it was someone playing a joke on me. It was no joke. After I had left Saskatchewan in 1984, businesses suffered even more, and Pioneer Trust, who held the first mortgage on the LaSalle Hotel, had gone bankrupt in early 1985. Word on the street had it that Northwest Trust of Alberta had bought Pioneer Trust's mortgages for 10 cents on the dollar and had hired Wolfgang to collect all personal guarantees on the mortgages. I had personally guaranteed the LaSalle mortgage and had to declare personal bankruptcy in the summer of 1987. After doing some research, I was surprised to find information about the business problems of that period. These can be accessed by clicking on the links provided in the description of this video. You may find it by clicking the Show More button. It would be another 8 years of saving up a nest egg from being a school principal before I return to Regina. This time to start an Academy of Learning franchise. But that will have to be another story for another day. Next week on Tuesday, I would like to talk about my dream of being a fighter pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force. It never happened. Life has strange twists that perhaps were meant to be. Stay tuned. I hope you all have a safe week. Bye-bye.